event organized by CRCS, Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies, an MA program in Religious Studies, and ICRS, Indonesia Consortium for Religious Studies, a PhD program by 3 universities, Universitas Gadjah Mada, UIN Yogyakarta, and Universitas Kristen Duta Wacana. I'm Aluna Pratisti, doctoral student in ICRS, your moderator for today's session. And here we are honored to host Mas Ali Ilham Al-Mujadidi, an alumnus of CRCS, also a staff member in the Institute of International Studies, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Our topic today is based on his research with title Progressive Muslim Environmentalism, the Eco-Theology and Ethics of the Nahdliyyin Front for Sovereignty over Natural Resources, or Front Nahdliyyin atas Kedaulatan Sumber Daya Alam. Mas Ilham also contributor for recently published book, Variety of Religion and Ecology, dispatched from Indonesia, published earlier this year by Lead Verlag, and he will present his research finding in the upcoming COP26 in Edinburgh University. As the title suggests, in this occasion, Muslim environmentalism will be discussed through the perspective of progressive Muslim and touch upon social and political contestation between actors. Without further ado, we welcome Mas Ilham to give a maximum 45-minute presentation, while a discussion will be following shortly after you finish your presentation. Mas Ilham, the time is yours.
Thank you very much for Mbak Aryuna Pratisti for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this Wednesday forum. I used to help manage Wednesday forum back when I was CRC student back in 2016. Right now I'm here as a speaker. I feel honored and also very happy to finally able to share with you part of my thesis. So thank you very much to CRCS and ICRS for having me in these discussions. Also, I'm a little bit nervous because these talks will be based on my research thesis, which I conducted in 2017 and 2018. It was like 3 years ago, so I hope I didn't miss some important details, but I hope I can deliver the presentation clear enough. So let me share my slides. Okay, I study progressive Muslim environmentalism and take FNKSDA as a case of study. So you may already like questioning what it means by progressive and what make it distinct from perhaps unprogressive environmentalism. The my background of my research actually comes from some empirical cases of agrarian conflicts, which in 2017 has as many as 659 conflicts, averaging 2 conflicts per day. There are also particular cases of some certain local conflicts, such as NIA, New Yogyakarta International Airport in Yogyakarta. Also, there is cement industry in Kendeng and gold mining project in Tumpang Pitu, Banyuwangi. Also, these land conflicts actually involve violent processes, most often between various actors, the local people with the state apparatus. So there is a concern on this environmentalism because there are allegedly 10-30 human rights violations. To make an example, Budi Pego, for example, sentenced for 3 months for protesting in Tumpang Pitu gold mining project and allegedly propagating the communist ideology. Also, there is a concern that there is an article actually in LR Times that talk about the suicide mission of environmentalism. And Indonesia is not an exception. We can take some example of Salim Kancil in East Java, who died over his protest against the sun mining, and also Yupatmi in Kendeng case. So I try to connect it with current discourse on Islam and ecology. So my focus will be the discourses, despite the discourse also connected with the activism, the environmentalism. So basically, land conflicts that becomes the empirical cases are less studied in Islam and ecology discourse, particularly in Indonesian case. There is also domination of mainstream interpretation of religions, such as, for example, Islam in institutionalized Islam or Christianity. There is also focus on theoretical construction, Islamic values, then local manifestation, Muslim experiences. So from the differentiation between Islamic values and Muslim experiences, we can see the Islamic values contains potentially universalization or essentialization of Islamic norms, while Muslim experiences focus more on local particular community experiences. So I try to find the discourse in Islam and ecology and find the connection. So what I found mostly in the scholarship of Islam and ecology is the focus on legal analysis of fiqh and sharia, Islamic norms and values of environment that extracted from canonical source of Quran and Hadith. They are trying to find the relations, redefining the relation between God, humans, and nature. There are also central concepts like Khalifah, Tauhid, Mizan, Fitrah, Ihsan, and so on. So this is a reflection actually to the classical approach, which is question about the domination of human towards nature. So in Islam, for example, questioning the role of Khalifah. In Christian, for example, questioning the role of the concept of imago Dei. And I also try to find the studies in Indonesia, which is studies on practice actually, but mostly focus on eco-pesantrens, the issues of eco-pesantren and the role of Islamic leaders, such as Kiai and Ulama in raising awareness. If you type Fahruddin Mangunjaya, for example, in Google, you will find so many literatures on eco-pesantrens. It shows the trends in studies on Indonesia. And also there is some studies on role of Islamic organizations such as NU and Muhammadiyah, which focus on conservation-based approach like reforestation or the cleaning of the environment and issuance of the fatwa. So there is also a particular living tradition such as indigenous practice done by Samsul Ma'arif, who studied the Amatuan communities. So I found that those studies, those discourses actually pay little attention to manifestation of the problem of environment that actually engage in power relation and political dimensions of the discourse. So some point maybe you can see here. There is, for example, lack of religious leaders' critical attitude towards government. Syed Hassan Nasser himself also says that there is no harsh criticism from them. So fatwas and theological arguments also have limitations. They do not resonate in the ground, in the actual condition of environmental problems. Also, there is a potentially, like I mentioned earlier, theologizing rather than addressing the actual issues. And perhaps also disconnected from local communities or grassroots who actually the main quote and unquote victims of the environmental problems. So I see from the discourse of Islam and ecology, there is a tendency to use textual normative approach rather than activism. So there might be a gap between what should be the norms and what happens in regarding environmental problems. So what actually happens when we talk of environmental problems, not only about our understanding should be redefined, but also there is an equal power relation of actors operating here. For example, the picture illustrates the power relation that I said earlier, usually between local people and the security or the state apparatus who protecting the company or the corporate or the government project. So there is also violent processes that we mentioned earlier. There is issues of human rights, and there is also ontological, epistemological, and political contestation. So not merely about the understanding of single interpretation of Islam, but there are very complex and dynamic situations that actually going on. For example, on different ontological position between how the local people see the environment and the land, for example, and the corporate or the company or the government who have a different view of the land. So there is ontological contestation between whose realities is actually more accurate, or, and then this becomes the epistemological approach to address the issues, and this is also political in the sense of whose power, who actually will win and lose. So there must be always, there is always a potentially win or lose in the environmental problems. So those issues that not have been addressed, I try to connect it with the discursive framework of progressive Muslim. So because I will analyze part of the NU activists or youth activism, I try to find the literature on NU who defines the progressive side of NU. So for example, here, most of the literature mentioned there is a characterization of progressive NU is socially engaged, informed by contemporary Muslim thinkers such as Al-Jabiri and Nasr Hamid Abu Zain, etc., and also incorporate Western critical theories. And there is also contestation between the legacy of Gus Dur. So Gus Dur regarded as unfinished text. So that's what characterized the progressive NU, the activists of NU. This is one of the example of the books that discuss the progressive side of NU. There are actually many terminologies like post-traditional Islam, there is also cultural NU, etc. I try to also find the connection with progressive ecology. What is actually progressive ecology? So it is characterized by political ecology and Marxist analysis, emphasizing liberation ideas, and have the hermeneutical privilege to the oppressed or to the affected communities. So there are many books. This is one of the example from Caroline Merchant, Radical Ecology. There are also particular studies like Najma Muhammad, who also study on Islamic political ecology. So I frame it within the discourse or within the study of Islam and ecology. So my focus here will on finding a discursive gap that may have lead to a new discourses of Islam and ecology. There is also here discourses on progressive Muslim. So FNKSDA actually claim themselves as progressive, following the progressive side of Islam. But as recent analysis from the Islam and ecology, there is both sides, there is like an absence. In progressive Muslim, for example, there is of absence in ecology and environmental concern, while the other side, studies of Islam and ecology, also there is an absence of power relation, political dimensions. So I try to like connect and find the gaps, maybe perhaps in FNKSDA. So what is FNKSDA? So it is an environmental movement that emerged out of concern of particular environmental cases in Sidoarjo, in Lapindo, and in Urut Sewu initially, but then extend their activism. So they try to respond to its main institutional body, which is a structural NU, for not taking agrarian and environmental issues seriously. So most of the affected communities in environmental problems are Nahdliyyin, the follower of NU, and FNKSDA focus on this Nahdliyyin, which is a grassroots or a civil society, compared to those in structural NU. So FNKSDA acknowledge the cultural affiliations, but yeah, remains independent and critical of NU. They focus on the impact of extractive capitalism, and they declare jihad against capitalism as their main agenda. And they also utilize a network of pesantrens because most of them are santri, by establishing pesantren agraria. Basically, pesantren agraria is like a short course for the activists, FNKSDA activists in their local particular case. For example, if there is environmental cases in Yogyakarta, they will do pesantren agraria to organize the activists to address those local issues. So they also make alliance with other movements. For example, GAAM, Anti-Erythropolis Movement, Global Anti-Erythropolis Movement. For the case of NIA, for example, also there is WALHI, JMPPK in Kendeng, also Jogja Darul Agraria, etc. And they do perform activism through Islamic traditional performance such as sholawat and prayers. So they also have a distinctive definition of Nahdliyyin. As I mentioned earlier, Nahdliyyin refers to the grassroots or the civil society, but or the oppressed. So they align to the oppressed, mustadh'afin, by taking the spirit of Nahda. However, this is not exclusively limited to NU adherents, but to those who struggle to protect their lands, particularly those who protect their rights, particularly regarding to land rights. And they also connect jihad against capitalism to that historical attachment to the NU. So there is a kind of new interpretation of capitalism as a form of colonialism. So this is the quotes by Hashim Ash'ari that always mentions as inspiration for them to fight against extractive capitalism. Which of the victims, most of them are peasant or farmer and fishermen. This painting is painted in some of the buildings in Yogyakarta International Airport before the eviction. So how do actually FNKSDA address their eco-theology? What makes it different from even the NU's environmental values or standings? So here they try to still ground it in Aswaja, traditional theological doctrine of NU, but they integrate Marxist social and political analysis to traditional theological mode of reasoning. So Marxism here as analytical tool to understand the nature of capitalism. So they insist, they emphasize that if we want to fight against the destruction of environment, we have to know exactly who we are facing, and they address it to capitalism. So capitalism is the main cause of environmental problems. So they also emphasize social piety and rights as a form of preserving the earth. This is basically the cosmological spectrum or the eco-theology. So they also discussing the role of Khalifa, for example, and Tawhid and Mizan. And the point of the Mizan is the rights, al-hukuk. Yeah, so individual piety should be accompanied by social piety. So the principle of cosmic balance is actually the equality, the balance between social problems and environmental problems. So they are both not separated. So there are also shifts from the common understanding of NU in Aswaja. So they reject Aswaja of the structural NU who didn't take into account the agrarian environmental issues because they have not basic theological principles. So they try to move from theology to praxis. So for example, the basis theology of Aswaja is tawasud, moderation against right-left political ideology. They try to construct as anti-fanaticism, critical and democratic. Also tawazun, balance between rational and textual inference or text and context. Here in the praxis, tawazun is counterpower and coexistence in struggle. The next is i'tidal, consistency in practice. So the praxis is consistency and militancy in the principle of justice. So This will result in progressive five, al-iman at-taqaddumi, which not only reforms religious understanding as mind of their critics, but also socially engage with the people, mostly those who are affected by environmental problems. So the methods in formulating Islamic legal response to environmental problems actually around the discussions, the examinations of Quran and Hadith, traditional theology and fiqh, and also Marxist epistemology. So I will illustrate 5 thematic issues on mining, collective assets, common ownership, farmer and means of production, planting, and also climate change. So when addressing the issue of mining in response to particular case in Kendeng and Banyuwangi, FNKSDA proposed the position that mining should be fully owned by the state, and it should not also have a destructive implication towards the protected areas. Also, the land should not be a dead land, should be a dead land, and for the objectives is for the public good, and if the utilization of the nature, taking the profits from nature, is beyond limits, called ifsad, and waste the nature, so the resistance is lower. So it is one of the legitimacy to fight against the destruction of environment, particularly caused by mining activities. So there is also concept of common ownership that discussed based on the hadith. So actually the hadith comprises of a very large technical, little technical analysis, but I just sum up here. So basically, in the modern context, there is a privatization of the commons that there is a privatization of commons through individual property rights. So commons is something that is needed by all the people. For example, like water and forest, jungle, and everything that is commonly needed by the people. So based on the hadith, it should not be privatized because it is for collective access and needs. This is also to respond to the commons agrarian conflict in Java. So common ownership is proposed, FNKSDA proposing the common ownership. So the common should not be privatized. There is also issues about farmers and means of productions in response to general conflicts in Java. So they are trying to take the values on hadith, but with a different interpretation and analysis. So separating farmers as a production, this is a Marxist approach. And the means of productions, the lands, agricultural equipment, etc., is forbidden. And if it's happened, then defending the farmer is obligatory. So this is another legitimacy to fight against the environmental destructions. There is also materialist approach on Quranic verses on farmer and fishermen. This is actually a very large analysis as well. But the point is that farmer represents the actual Khalifa, or those who have a responsible for the environmental protection. So there is also issues of planting, or today we know it as greening, in response to the concept of ecosystem in between Islam and capitalism. So Muslim, according to Hadith, with this interpretation, encouraged to plant to prosper the ecosystem. But today, planting is obligatory because there is a different conception between ecosystem in Islam and ecosystem in capitalism. This is in Islam. Islam positions human as equals with other living beings, so they have the spirit of sharing and not superiority, while capitalism counts ecosystem as a property or commodity. This is actually what often happens in the environmental movement. For example, mostly local people will claim their land as sacred, or they have deep connection with the land, so they cannot sell the land, but the company or the corporate usually will see the land as something profitable, and they try to compensate the local people with money to move to other land, but they are rejected, so there is a conflict. So different interpretation on ecosystem also causing the conflict. So this is actually from another form of different epistemological contestations. Also, there is issue on climate changes in response particularly to extreme drought. So usually when there is a natural disaster, they see it as natural disaster, but in political ecology and Marxist approach, this is seen as unnatural disaster because it influences by social factors, whether industries or other factors. But this is social, not natural. This is caused by social activities. For example, like water crisis. So when extreme drought happen, there is water, the crisis of water, and Muslim usually informed to pray for asking the rain. But today, in massive environmental crisis, if we pray for the rain will be turned to disaster because there is no balance between water and trees. So there will be floods instead of instead of the rain who is yeah, there is the point is there is no balance between the water and the trees. So defending the earth from the exploitation is mandatory. So finally, those discourses reflecting the difference between FNKSDA and previous discourse. So I may here only focus on discursive part of FNKSDA, and I see that there is a difference between FNKSDA and other environmental movement. They take into account power relation and political dimensions instead of textual normative interpretations. Also, they employ Marxist analysis to its traditional theological arguments. So, despite they use Western Marxist analysis, they still ground their theology to the traditional theological argument, which is Aswaja. So it shows that a variety of Muslim experiences in response to environmental and ecological problems. Usually, when we talk about Islam and ecology, it is represented by, for example, NU and Muhammadiyah in Indonesian case. So those or elite figures such as Kiai or Santri. But FNKSDA try to take a distinction and independent moves by interpreting independently through integration between this traditional theological argument with Marxist analysis. So it actually representing hybrid movement between Marxian understanding and Islamic tradition and the socially engaged activism by standing with the oppressed. So that's all my presentation. Actually, I may not show how do they practice their activism, but since my focus only on the discursive gap between progressive Muslim and Islam and ecology, I see the FNKSDA fits maybe offering the new discursive and perhaps inviting more discussion and maybe helps the policy makers to take into account and take into consideration of power relation political dimension, also to leads to different outcomes. So thank you very much. That's all for my discussion. Question and answers are all yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mas Ilham. A truly insightful presentation. I took some note on your interesting insight early on the difference between Islamic environmentalism, it tends to be normative and embrace universality, with Muslim environmentalism, which based on particular and local people interpretation. Thank you for sharing this theoretical insight, which I believe is important for underpinning our discussion. Okay, now I welcome all participants to give comments and question. You can raise your virtual hand and ask directly, or you can drop your question on the chat room and I will read it for you. Please. I haven't seen anything. While waiting for question, perhaps Mas Ilham, would you kindly share with us how you conduct your research? Are you joining the protests or did you use other method of observation?
So yeah, actually from my thesis, I take some particular cases that I observe. I involved in some protests in Yogyakarta International Airport construction and conflicts. I tried to participate, but it didn't take. I mean, it will take a length of time to analyze the whole activism, because at the time I tried to connects every particular context that they try to address. So I only focus on the discursive framework. But I do take a particular observations, like participating in the pesantren agraria and try to understand what is actually they are going to address, how is the process of the reasoning to address the environmental problems. Also, like the case in NIA in Yogyakarta, they are building alliance, extending their voices into international audience by integrating and by discussing and making alliance and connection with particular case in France, for example, Fayad as the national committee plays an important role in extending their activism.
Okay, thank you. And your answer is linked to the question from YouTube. It's from Jiahui. The question is, what is the exact content of the course of Pesantren Agraria? Perhaps you can tell us about this.
So Pesantren Agraria is actually, simply speaking, it is eco-theology discourse discussing the problems, the actual problems. For example, there is a problems of NIA in Yogyakarta. They conduct Pesantren Agraria to like organize the people, and mostly santris and mostly students, to engage with the particular case that they address. So they are living in the particular context of conflicts, try to understand the situations and try to give address in approaching, in using by using the traditional fiqh. So also there is a discussion actually in discussion of theories in Pesantren Agraria for the theoretical approach to the problems, but they are living in the case. So, for example, they discussing about theology and fiqh agraria, economic, political economy, and women and agraria, for example. They try to find the connection, the theoretical, the epistemological approach to the problem, which is very particular. So the case of FNKSDA in Jogja, for example, it is different from the case in Kendeng and in Banyuwangi and in Purut Sewu, for example. So Pesantren Agraria, they also call it as kaderization, but there are also local people who involved to. So this role is to address the local particular case that they face. So yeah, maybe that's can answer the question.
Yeah, I remember that the Pesantren Agraria is held like 3 or 2 days event. The first one is theoretical, and the second day you visit peasant or farmers who impacted by the environmental problem. Yes.
Yeah, they actually try to learn from the local people because most of them are there are local people who affected, part of the community. There is much of them are the scholars who try to understand the situation. So they are learning through organizing each other. So this is the form of socially engaged activism that I discussed, but I didn't actually discuss very much because I focus on discursive work of them. So what and what they offer on the discursive of Islam and ecology. So yeah, there is a process of understanding. Pesantren Agraria is process of understanding the local particular cases of environmental problems.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Ilham. I know this because we met at certain pesantren. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I welcome another question or comment. Please notify me if there's other question from YouTube, Mas Abdi.
There is no, not now.
Okay. Okay. Again, while waiting, this is interesting. Your topic is interesting because you mentioned about ecological problem and in social and political contestation, in terms of social and political contestation. And another interesting point is the compatibility of traditional fiqh and Marxist perspective. How you elaborate this? How are you seeing that there is compatible between traditional fiqh and Marxist, or how FNKSDA perceive this?
Actually, they find that ontologically there is a contradiction between Islam and Marxism, but it is inevitable if you want to fight, if you want to critique capitalism, you have to understand capitalism, and if you want to understand capitalism, you have to employ Marxist analysis. So, ontologically speaking, they are not compatible, but in epistemology and axiology, they are compatible. This is how I see, how I get informed by FNKSDA activists as well.
Thank you. So there's a part of compatibility, and the other is incompatible.
Yeah, there is kind of dynamic integration between the two. So what make FNKSDA distinct, actually, the critique to capitalism also absent in the discourse of Islam and ecology. And this is important because most of the destructive project to environments causing by the system, the capitalism. So yeah, this is what made FNKSDA may offer a new discursive on Islam and ecology. They need to take into account like a political contestation in the field, the power relation in the field, because the problem of environment is not only the problem of particular communities, for example, which is like in pesantren, for example, there are many environmental problems, but what did not take into consideration is in the front line of environmental problems, there is many issues. There is which is very violent, and sometimes, it is about win or lose.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we're still waiting for a question or comments from participant. Please, yes, please.
May I?
Please, Mas Angki.
Thank you, please.
Hey, Ilham. Thank you very much, Ilham.
Yeah, thank you.
Real scholar working on ecology. Thank you very much. I have two, but let me start with one. Like the very last point that you mentioned, the front line of the environmental problems. If you look at the way and apa namanya and FNKSDA works, I'm thinking about the way, for example, masyarakat adat is working on this issue, yeah. If masyarakat adat belong to the territory that they are struggling for, FNKSDA work for whom? Like, do they have like a certain territory they struggle for, or do they struggle against the state, like policies, against even like, the public. Like if you see the way they engage the issue, to whom they basically work with and work against. So I think, yeah, that is my main question. So the way they work on that subject, to whom they engage with, and against. Thank you, Ilham. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ancu, for the question. So I discussed earlier a little bit profile of FNKSDA. So the pesantren agraria is actually the process to organize the people and with the particular context. So they are engaged with mostly Nahdliyyin or the cultural NU as opposed to the structural NU, the NU adherents, who struggle for the case of agrarian conflicts. So basically, they are protecting. They are struggles. They advocate for the struggle of Nahdliyyin, which until my observation in 2017, they have 16 branches around the Nusantara, like in Yogyakarta, in Bandung, Jakarta Raya, in Riau as well, in Kalimantan. So basically, they try to advocate the people who struggle against environmental problems, agrarian problems. Yeah, they take also alliance. They do alliance with other environmental problems that address the particular issues. So yeah, this is the way they engage with the actual problems, the frontline problems of environmental conflicts.
Yeah. Thank you. That's hopefully answer Mas Ancu question about to whom they engage and against. It's very interesting question. Mas Ancu, I believe you have other question.
Yeah, if I may follow up that.
Yes. Please.
And thank you very much. So engaging ecology and Islam, it seems that FNKSDA seems to offer potentials, for that subject. Now, in your observation, how do you think, like the potentials they are offering, especially on engaging the issue, Islam and ecology, Islam and environmental, in Islam, I mean in Indonesia, well, through and all. So like if you see, for example, how FNKSDA engage Nahdliyyin in general, yeah, the big one, like how the subject being promoted, disseminated among NU people and also Muslims in general. Do you see some potentials and also challenges in that? Thank you.
Thank you, Pancho, for the question. It is a very a critical question. So basically, they are challenging the dominant discourses of environmental problems, because as I said, there is epistemological contestations going on in every particular case of environmental conflicts. So indeed, there are potential that they offer to take into account that environmental problems in the front lines involving this kind of issues that didn't discussed earlier, discussed in the previous scholarship of Islam and Ecology. So, so yeah, they are actually challenging and offering new discourses based on the actual problems, immediate effect of the problems, which is the protection not only for the land or the people or the environment, but all of them. So yeah, I think that's my answer.
So if I may jump in, so the subject is not only the people but also the environment.
Yeah, it is
ecology.
actually interrelated when you yeah, like when I discussed earlier, Muslim takes the position that equals between environment, plants, and animal, for example. So protecting the environment means protecting the people, because environmental problems issues is human rights issues. Yeah, it is kind of like the background. It's sometimes suicide missions, and scholarship of Islam and ecology didn't address these issues. They address about the protecting the environment, for example, the redefinition of the role of Khalifa, for example, different interpretation of the role of Khalifa. But they didn't talk about this kind of issues, these actual issues, immediate effect of environmental problems going on in the field. So yeah, I think FNKSDA are offering new challenging discourses to Islam and ecology. Also, it is as it is part of their critics towards structural NU, who they assume as too moderate to environmental problems. So they are take this kind of militancy. So it is actually costing their life and their energy and their ecology. So yeah, that's perhaps what makes FNKSDA distinct, and that's why FNKSDA is progressive.
Thank you, Mas Ilham. Before I go to other question from YouTube, Mas Ancu, do you have other feedback about earlier answer from Ilham?
I would wait until others have questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah.
Now I will go to YouTube. From YouTube, there is Mbak Ani questioning about, I read it for you. For struggle or movement, you said it's about winning or losing. How do you calculate the power of the opponent in order to win? Is there any case proven you have win?
So yeah, actually the word win or lose may be a tricky word, because we cannot measure exactly like how do we consider that, for example, the advocacy of FNKSDA are successful, such as in advocating the NIA, it is finally established the aerotropolis, but they are at least like the idea remains being discussed. So this is another way of so maybe in the case they are loose, they cannot protect the environment because the power relations, but actually they are able to like bring it into an extending discourses. So there are maybe public discourses and public awareness towards this kind of things. That's one thing. The second thing is that when they are advocating or campaigning or resonating the environmental problems, they are actually referring to each other. So there is a power of like a process of understanding the way, such as the strategy, how do they actually address different types of challenge in power relations. such as a legal approach. So they have no legal until the time I study FNKSDA, they have no legal particular people or the one who can defend in the legal, but still they try to find the alliance with other people to empower the people, so the movement. So yeah, winning or losing in particular case is kind of like yeah, it's a tricky word, but yeah, we can measure the other influences afterwards, whether or not the particular case is successful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mas Ilham. I will go to Mas Agung. Mas Agung, question: why did FNKSDA take Marxist approach? Isn't this a bit counterproductive strategically, considering that Marxism is still associated with communism, according to TAP MPR in 1956?
Yeah, it is very interesting question. Thank you for the question. So, like I said earlier, they are integrating Marxism because they need to critics the capitalism, and they need to identify the power relation. Usually, theoretically in political ecology, they employ Marxist because this kind of analysis of power relation between industries and companies usually, and development project of the government. But they sustain the movement despite the years Marxist analysis by integrating the traditional approach. So they are accepted because there is still theological and traditional approach to the problems, in approaching the problems. So yeah, this is kind of others, like I said, that Marxist epistemology used to understand the power relations and the political contestation in the field.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mas Ilham. Is there any question from YouTube, or I open another question from Zoom? Perhaps you can jump in anytime or raise your hand. Okay. Let's see. Not yet. This is interesting. From earlier discussion, you mentioned that your research is conducted in 2017, right? Yeah. So are you following the communities nowadays? What are the changes between these 4 years lapse? Is there any significant change?
Yeah, I actually didn't much get in touch with them after this thesis because yeah, there are personal yeah, I have to come back home and do something else, but sometimes I still follow their activism through social media. There are recent cases as well that caused the leave, if I'm not mistaken, in Wadas. In Wadas, they are also like standing in the front lines, doing advocacy in what is going on in Wadas. I don't really like delving deep into the problems, but I know that they are addressing the problems. So perhaps there are also changing and development and extension in eco-theology and eco-justice ethics. Perhaps there are also changing in the way they understand the situations, but So yeah, but the principle at the time is like what I found. So there is also change in leadership in terms of national committee from Al-Fayyad, who I take much information about the eco-theology because he is the one who served to like address the issues through traditional theological responses, examinations. But now, if I'm not mistaken, there are two other. He is already replaced. Change. There is change in national committee. Maybe there is a different also approach to the different strategy to the problems.
Thank you, Mas Ilham. There's another question from YouTube from David Effendi. What kind of influence of watchdog film to strengthen an FNKSDA?
Watchdog?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mas David Effendi, for the question. Yeah, I didn't really observe the connection between Watchdog and FNKSDA, but I know they are connected through the film, such as Sexy Killer, if I'm not mistaken. And that's after I conducted the research. So perhaps, what is it? Watchdog film is part of their alliance to extend the issues. So it is important because they can be a new alliance, and in social media you can reach more people, and not only it is like across generations, across maybe personal and different ideological positions. But yeah, maybe perhaps that is the potential of the influence of making alliance with Watchdog.
Making alliance, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
making alliance.
Yeah, I remember in Bandung also case of Dago Elos. Also, there is also alliance between an FNKSDA with other community, local community.
Yeah. Usually when FNKSDA, since the first time, they are taking alliance with those who have the same objective, the same purpose, the same goals, that is protecting the environment for the people. And they are kind of referring each other. For example, there is maybe FNKSDA speak in the other non-FNKSDA organization, but they are try to referring each other. This is kind of building the power as well, because the much you extend your ideas, the more it is extend to wider public audience. So yeah, actually mostly the activists is referring each other.
Yes, thank you, Mas Ilham. I welcome another question in Zoom. You can jump in anytime. Okay, again, while waiting, I kind of interested with the word progressive Muslim. What is your ideas about the word or the concept of progressive Muslim?
Yeah, actually, this is a very contested words, but they understand it as generic words. So to show that so basically in progressive discourses, as I mentioned earlier, those writings such as Omid Safi and Adis Diderija discussing about the role of progressive, they try to differentiate themselves with the liberals who only address issues such as radicalism, tolerance, individual freedoms. They are more engaged with a social approach, social analysis. So yeah, progressive Muslim basically try to advocate for the oppressed, the people who, yeah, they often analyze between the rich and the poor. For example, there is issues also social justice, inequality, but unfortunately they didn't address environmental concerns. So I find that FNKSDA, who claim themselves as progressive as well, may contribute to this discursive gap. So they can offer a new discursive in the discourse of Islam and ecology and in the discourse of progressive Muslim.
Okay. So it set vis-a-vis with the in power relation with what you call it, the oppression, yeah, and voice the oppressed.
Yeah.
Okay. I welcome if there are any other questions. Okay. If there isn't any other question, perhaps I see Mas Ancu is opening his mic.
Just to fill in.
Yes.
This is for a researcher, Mas Ilham. A researcher doing research, carrying out something, you may call it like responsibility, ethics to the subjects. If the people of an FNKSDA ask you, like, what do you do for us? Like, what you do, what you contribute to us, to them. So what would be your answer for them?
Yeah, I think they are hoping that I can engage with them, but maybe through this research, I can kind of giving giving the discourse to the ecology. So the outcomes of the research, this research is also to voicing their voices to reach more audiences and perhaps to receive more alliance and maybe extensions of I think extension of audiences and so on. I think that's only the contributions that perhaps I can offer to them.
So far, is there any question from the FNKSDA to you about that? Is there any discussion about that?
Not really, because as I said, after the thesis and doing thesis is overwhelming, so there are much pressure to the deadline. That's why I'm well aware that my research on FNKSDA is very limited. This is maybe only discussing the discourse on Islam and ecology. I didn't really take deeply into their activism. Yeah, but there is something important in these discourses that yeah, the gap, the theoretical gap, the discursive gap in Islam and ecology. So the yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's I think one last question for today's session from Abdi. After engaging with the FNKSDA while doing research and seeing the result of their advocacy, what are your suggestions as an academia for the movement to be more effective?
So yeah, actually maybe they are more understand the context of the struggle that they address. So maybe I have no like proposals to them to their strategy, but their influence in changing the policy, for example, is remain wanting because it may possibly end up in theologizing the case because yeah, there are challenges. There are many challenges in the field. Those that I mentioned, power relations, and there is a possibility of win or lose. So there's need to evaluating the strategy, for example, evaluating the approach to the problems. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned with them, so I engage, I participate with them. Maybe they are more understand the situation than me because yeah, I kind of didn't engage in length for the activism.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mas Ilham, for your answers. And I believe that there's so much thing to talk about when we talk about progressive environmentalism, and also you can search perhaps another examples of this kind of movement, not only in Indonesia but also in other states, and compare the movement itself. But due to the time limit, thank you, Mas Ilham, for sharing your research insight with us, and I wish you good luck for your presentation in the COP26.
Thank you very much, Mbak Aliona and CRCS and ICRS for having me in this Wednesday forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
thank you.
Thank you, Panchu.
Yeah, I also want to thanks to all the participants for joining this Wednesday forum. Please do come back next week for another enriching discussion. And you can go to ICRS Instagram or Facebook to update the topic. As for now, I'm your moderator Aliona Pratisti. Sign out. Thank you very much. See you again next time.
Thank you all.
Lagi di mana, Lam?
Ya, Pak.
Lagi di mana?
Lagi di meja.
Ya, Pak.
Lagi di mobil Pak Ancu. Ya Tuhan.
Sudah nggak di YouTube lagi kan? Masih di live.
Sebentar, Cek. Tutup dulu YouTube. Udah.